welcome to the Hub Zurich. I don't know how many of you already have heard about the Hub Zurich beforehand. If not, you'll find out today. But actually the topic of my presentation, which I want to give, the title is Collaborative Innovation. And when I thought about the title, I figured what would be a good title for a creative morning crowd that actually show up. And that's what I came up with. Because actually what we do here is more something different. Right, so in a way it's about collaborative innovation, but I'll come to that more towards the end of the presentation. What I want to start with is a different term, and you press next, Hagen. Social entrepreneurship. How many of you have actually already heard the term and kind of know what it is? Maybe just raise your hands. It's about half. So can anyone quickly tell me what it is? Antonio.
Thank you, Michel. I believe social entrepreneurship is a way of making sense of what we do in our everyday life and making a business out of change, making change happen and be a social innovator, social challenger also with a proper business orientation, so to speak. At least this is the way I look upon it, as what I do.
Is there a different opinion, maybe? Or an extension? No, okay. The reason I'm stressing is that there's quite an argument. I'm actually doing a PhD at the moment on social entrepreneurship. And when you read the articles, no one really agrees on what the term actually means. And what we have decided here, because the Hub is in a way an attempt to foster social entrepreneurship, that we don't want to define it so much, but really just kind of do it and see what happens. But usually when you talk about social entrepreneurship, usually it's referred to one guy, and if you can press the next kind of slide, you might probably have heard of Mohammed Yunus, who is the founder of Grameen Bank, which kind of revolutionized the banking industry with the notion of microfinance. And they have quite literally changed the lives of millions of Bangladeshi, and are also expanding all around the world to combine both business, but more than business, and that way actually trying to change the social. So the way that I personally understand social entrepreneurship is that you do try to change society or address a societal problem through business, through entrepreneurship. But this could be very broad, so it doesn't have to be in banking or whatever. It could even be in arts, how you kind of reconfigure the way we live. Because in the end, what we try to do here also at the Hub is to provide a space where we really just practice a different way of living so that in the end, hopefully, we'll get more sustainable. Now, if you go to the next slide, the interesting thing about Yunus is that if you look at the word social entrepreneurship, you maybe notice that there's the term social in there, and there's usually a big argument what that means. So sometimes people think it's a very normative thing, so it's good entrepreneurship. But social has a very different meaning, which means it's about relations. It's about bigger than just one person. And the paradox is when you read all these stories about social entrepreneurs, it's always, as in the case of Yunus, it's like this one guy, it's usually a man, who is kind of this hero figure who goes out to save the world. And that's usually what most people associate with social entrepreneurship. We here try to have a different view. So if you go to the next slide, Hagen, we feel that social entrepreneurship cannot be done just by one person anyway, because if you take that seriously, and actually want to change the social, you have to engage, of course, with other people. And in the end, it's all about kind of embedding what you're trying to do in your community, in your ecosystem that surrounds you, but also through networks. And I think it's actually quite obvious that if you want to really make a change, you do have to look around and see what's happening, and you cannot do it by yourself. And this is actually where the Hub comes in. So if you go to the next slide, Hagen. So the Hub is a network of We call them collaborative spaces, which means that it kind of emerged from the sense that there's so many people around the world who have ideas, who want to kind of make a difference in this world, but a lot of times they're kind of stuck. They're by themselves. So the idea came up in London about, I think it's 5 years ago, where some of these people just said, well, let's just kind of get together, team up, and pool our resources to rent out a space where we can work on our own projects, but at the same time, we kind of support each other and thus build a community ourselves to really go forward. And this idea has started in London with, I think it was 5 people. After a few months, it was 50 people. Then it became 200. And then it became a bit of the magnet where anyone who connects to that theme, who wanted to do something with the environment or in poverty or even in education, just kind of went there to meet other people who are working on these topics and connect. And then people came from different countries as well, just to see what's going on, and said, hey, this is cool. Let's do this also in Amsterdam, let's do this in Sao Paulo. And that's how it's been spreading around the world. So far we have, I think, 24 hubs around the world. And there is 80 more in the pipeline, ranging from Shanghai to Johannesburg, even Kabul and Bogota, because apparently it seems that there is really a need for people who do want to make a change somehow to come together and that way really cross-fertilize with their own ideas and really make that social happen. Because if you remember the slide before where it was about community, ecosystem and networks, this is really what the hub is all about, to not just talk about that, but make that happen. Because we realized also here in Zurich that mostly looking at all the things which we kind of have to change in the world, we don't believe we have a lack of ideas. There are many, many ideas what we could do, should do, also can do, but usually what doesn't really work is the action. For some reason we get stuck on the idea level. So what we try to do here with the hub also in Zurich is to create an environment, a space, a collaborative space, where anyone who does have an idea or a project, or even already a business, that tries to make a difference can actually find we usually use the metaphor of kind of nourishing ground, and nährboden, where these ideas kind of find the right connection, resources, whatever, to really then be transformed into real action. And now we are in Zurich, so if you press to the next slide even, we're going to zoom in. So this is where we are, and as you notice, we actually have 2 arches in this viaduct space. The one you're sitting on right now is the one on the right, obviously. And this concept was actually developed or designed by our dear friend Antonio, who you quickly heard before, who offered his help, because our team were actually 4 people, mainly from the, let's call it the business side, with not so much talent in design or just creating a space like that. So we reached out to other people, and we found Antonio, who offered his help to design this space with us. And what he or we came up with is that actually what we need is 2 different kind of environments or spaces to make this vision of a collaborative space happen. So what you see on the left side, we call it the kind of workspace, where the idea is that people can come in with their laptops, a bit like in a Starbucks. They just find their space, sit there and work. And so usually this sounds quite simple, but what's interesting is that because it's not just anyone who comes here to work, we actually have this membership system where any person who wants to work here, we have an interview to make sure that it's kind of the right crowd which gathers in this hub space, and not just kind of random strikers who like maybe the viaduct or can't get enough of the train. So what we do is we have just little conversations with people to see whether there's a personal fit. You know, we're kind of close to each other here. It's very much based on trust. We have to trust people, but then also, again, back to this kind of a thought about an ecosystem. We try to make sure that we have a good balance of entrepreneurs, of maybe web designers, of even people from the corporate world to come together and really create a kind of a platform where really the right people meet. So in this way, the picture actually now looks a bit different than it is here. We designed also the tables in a special way that are really designed that you almost have to bump into each other. So, so even though the idea is to have different niches where people really can work, the purpose is always to enable these connections and to make sure that it's not just happening randomly when you go for a coffee, like Café Noir, and maybe just meet some people. What we have here in the hub concept is the notion of a host. Actually, Niels here is going to be our first host, and his role or task is, because he knows everyone who's actually at the hub. So when you come in and you might be working on, I don't know, eco-fashion or a solar project, wherever, he knows exactly who else might be interesting for you to meet. And he will make sure that you actually meet this person so that these connections really do happen beyond only at the coffee machine. And we also plan to have virtual check-ins with, for example, Twitter, where when you come to the hub space, you can just let people know, I'm here, I'm working in this field, is there anyone who wants to connect to me to talk about that? Or you can also write, anyway, I'm busy, leave me alone, I have a deadline coming up. But those are the things we want to play with to really make sure that this collaborative space is not just a nice word, but it's actually happening. And we understand that to make that really happen, we need both kind of a focused atmosphere where people actually can work, and more of an interactive space where people can more just meet and talk, or have little presentations as is happening right now, or even some workshops, and that's what the second space is for. So where you're sitting now, during the day usually we'll use it as a kind of a lounge. So the idea is to have a lot of these bean bags and cushions and stuff here. So it's really comfortable and people can just hang out here, maybe even just check emails or have little conversations. In the back there, we'll create some meeting rooms. We still have to get the money to build them, so they're on hold, but we're getting there. So you actually also have some privacy if you need them. And down there, this is going to be mostly the kitchen area, where we're going to have a big kitchen table. So the idea is that in the left space, it's really going to be more quiet, more work-focused, and then if you talk, you just go over. And the way this actually works as a business for the ones who are interested, because this whole hub thing, we're actually trying to be a bit socially entrepreneurial ourselves, that we're not dependent on just grants or the government or whatever. The way it works is that people who become members, they actually pay for the hour they use the space. So what you do is you get a monthly membership, and it starts from 5 hours per month, all the way up to unlimited, where you actually get a key. And then you can just kind of use the space as you like. We've been sleeping here about almost 2 or 3 times a week. So this also might become kind of a round-the-clock thing where really things are happening at any point in time. And it's fascinating to see, if you sleep here on a Friday or on a Saturday, how when the last people leave here, the first people come from Hive, and the other way around. In the morning when we get up, the last people leave from Hive, and they're just next door. So we'll create a kind of a 24-hour economy around here. Right, so and this kind of mechanism to have it a very flexible thing where people can just go by the hour really makes it possible that we have maybe 5 or 10 people who are here almost all the time, who also stabilize the community. But we have a capacity of almost 250 people, we calculated, who can actually use this space. Whereas 50% will only be about this 5-hour kind of memberships. But the really cool thing about that is that you always meet new people. So it doesn't get stabilized with just maybe the 30 spaces that we can offer here to work. But it really ensures that you have both a stable core of really social entrepreneurs, but then you have a huge kind of periphery of different people coming in, bringing new ideas, new inspirations, and hopefully maybe even hook up with you to make your project happen. So I guess that's mostly for the space. So now we can already go back to the last and first slide, where we go back to the initial word, which was collaborative innovation. Because in a way, to me at least, this is really kind of the future way of how we can actually solve some of our global issues. Because most of the issues we have at the moment are very complex. They cannot be solved by either one company or one person or one project or even one government. What needs to happen in a way is that all different people, kind of come together around topics or problems and figure out how we can actually, solve climate change, or how do we address poverty. So in the end, what's really happening here in this space with the kind of hub movement around the world is that we're trying to connect all the bottom-up grassroots initiatives, not just here in Zurich. Like we're really trying to get together all the different initiatives which are happening in that space, but also globally. Because in the end, that would be the vision, that if you come up with something here in Zurich which really works, both from an impact perspective, but also from a business perspective, that through the hub network, you can actually scale into different countries. Because of course, what's really cool about this is that you get immediate access to local networks around the world, and they again can help you to spread much faster. And this is, in the end, the really cool thing about social entrepreneurship, where because you actually do want that your idea spreads around the world, there is much less focus on competition and much more focus on cooperation and collaboration. And we just want to kind of build the infrastructure to enable that to happen. Right. So currently, please correct me, Niels, because he's the one in charge. I think we have 37 members at the moment, which is actually quite good because we're still in the prototyping phase. So we said until the end of the year, we'll try something. We already have some members coming in, but also we're still building, we're doing events, whatever. We just see what happens. So there's already 37 people who have signed up. Which means that usually there's around 3 to 4 people here during the day already kind of working while we're still painting next to them. And this all happened without any marketing. So what we actually did at the start, we know each other now for 1 year, so this whole thing started 1 year ago. And what we did at the very beginning is we just had coffee with a lot of people in the Zurich space, or who kind of relate to that space, and told them about this initiative and invited them to kind of hook up with us. And that's how these 37 people came together. And this should now be scaled up to 250 within a year and a half, I think. And we're really taking the time, we don't want to be in a rush to make that happen, because in the end, the biggest value that this space can actually offer is not so much the physical space, but the people you meet here. So you want to make sure that we get the right people and don't just accept people because they also pay money. Which brings us to the second topic, which is the investment. Our strategy was that since the foundation landscape in Switzerland is very good, we set this up as a non-profit association, which means that we are eligible for grants from foundations. So the intent was always that for the investment, which is about 500,000, a little bit more, we wanted to get grants, which we achieved. I think we got about 200,000 in grants altogether, but not beyond. And then in July we had a little crisis to figure out, because we already had the space, and from August on we were going to pay rent, and we was like, oh, so how are we going to now, actually build this space, because we didn't have enough money to make it happen. So we knew that within a month we had to raise about 250,000 Swiss francs, which we did, but not through grants. But then we actually said, well, this is a business, so in the end we actually have a business case. So being from the HSG, we went back to our roots and actually wrote a proper business case, which also showed that you can actually get investment not just from grants, but also from banks. So we got a credit line from the Alternative Bank Schweiz and the Gemeinschaftsbank in Basel, which are two institutions which try to work a bit differently than normal banks, as they also support people like us, which do not really have any collateral, but just a good idea. So they gave us very good conditions to make that happen. But this still wasn't enough. There was only 150. And the last 100, we then actually got through a different idea, which was, with all these coffee talks that we had actually gathered a community of about 200 people who kind of supported us, at least symbolically, coming to our events that we organized. So we figured, well, if we ask them to give us a microloan, starting from 1,000 to 5,000 per person, we only need maybe 20, 30, 40 people. And that's how we did it. In the end, we got, I think, 42 people who gave us a microloan, which is interest-free, for a year and a half. And we managed to get together almost 100,000 within, I think it was 3 weeks in the end. How we kind of just sent one email and kind of resonated and got back. Now, of course, we have to refinance that in a year and a half, which means that we really have to make sure that the operations here also work. And it's not just a nice idea, but it actually works as a business as well. Yeah. So that's the finance background. Yes, we're still talking with UBS, but in a in a different corner. UBS also has a foundation where we were presenting a couple of weeks ago. Maybe you want to actually answer a question, yeah.
Hi, Christoph is my name. I can actually say something to UBS and of course other corporates, other larger institutions. So, I mean, first of all, this hub project sounds sexy for companies if you think about corporate sponsorship. For conventional financing, for conventional banks, the business case might not be robust enough in the very first place, especially because there is no collateral. I mean, there are no securities that we can offer. In terms of UBS, very specifically, we popped up at all different stages within the company. So within the firm, within the bank. So it was, we asked for credit line, for instance. We talked to the social investment department. We talked to the foundations, and this is pretty interesting because this happens all the time with the hub. So we run around and look for instance, for corporate partners, and it's quite interesting of where do you actually access a company. Is it the HR department? Is it the strategy department, marketing department? The storyline is always a bit different, and of course the interests of the company is always a bit different. We definitely invite also big banks, also big companies to become partners, because we think that's also where the hub can contribute a lot of change, and the multiplier effect of working with large companies is great. But thus far, we are just gathering the experience. So with UBS, with the foundation, we are awaiting our request for funding there, and hopefully, please.
So just to extend that as well, when we have now Swisscom, who gave us 2 phone booths, which we're going to use just in the other space for some more quiet time. But they're also sponsoring us with other equipment, and the same goes for AXA Winterthur. But the reason we always, when we talk to them, and also how we agreed, is that whatever sponsorship is happening, it has to happen also on a content level. So it's not just money and we give the logo or a nice little story, but we really want to work with them. So for example, AXA Winterthur is currently developing something they call green solutions, where they try to understand how they can actually, through their core business, can contribute to a more sustainable society. So there's a kind of a point where we can actually cooperate and see how we can bring in our own community for that company to actually go forward with these thoughts. So in this sense, we also invite people from corporations to maybe work here 1 day per week or 1 day per month to really get access to maybe a different context and bring that back into the company. Because in the end, if you really want to make a change, you also have to factor in the big players. And the whole logic is that we can then start a kind of a different cycle where then maybe corporate entrepreneurs, can pick up these thoughts and thus transform the way we actually work and operate. There was a question back there still. So in our business case, which we did, we actually calculated a cash flow gap. So we have time, at least until the end of the year, but also beyond, not to have a balanced cash flow already. But what we've been doing with these 37 people, of course, they're already paying as well. But mostly our kind of cash cow has been this space here, where, for example, there was a story about the pillows. You know, Kraft Foods actually came here to have an event, or actually a workshop, about sustainable design, how they can incorporate that more into their own company. So they figured this is the perfect space to do that. And they gave us quite a bit of money just to be able to do that here. So that's one revenue stream which we want to develop, only with the kind of precondition that it's not just a Christmas party for big corporations to come here, but it has to be somehow connected to what we do here. And as a present, they did leave the pillows, which were kind of, no, they actually left them. So that's one big revenue stream, which helps at the moment, but right now we're financed until the end of the year, at least. There was actually an initiative on the global level to make that happen, because then of course it gets interesting when, if you work, I don't know, in eco-fashion, you can connect directly to other people in the world who work on the same topics. Now, the people who founded the hub, they, I think, made a pretty common mistake that they wanted to build it themselves. So it got a bit stuck in the beta version, and now we're at a point where we have to kind of redefine what could be a different system that we can leverage rather than building it ourselves, because the hub is not a software house, it's about physical space and hosting. Which means that at the moment we don't have that system, which of course is really a shame, because that would be, especially on the global level, a big factor to actually enable these connections. Now what we plan here, actually, is Sunny here? Yes. Well, you want to say something about that?
Hello everybody, I'm Sunny. Good to be here. Basically, I'm actually just investigating exactly that point, because I absolutely agree with you. It's really interesting nowadays. We have all this technology, we have these options. I mean, there are many ways to, within companies, I mean, these solutions have been searched, trying to find ways on a virtual level to get people connected. And I'm actually right now taking up this project to sort of find out, you know, what kind of options do we have in terms of existing technologies, and on the other hand, what are their needs? So, you know, I don't think we want it to be like the 5th social platform which people have. It should be something which is very open, and something which allows us to sort of integrate really all these different streams of feedback loops, like, you know, like Twitter, you mentioned before, you know, you check in with Twitter. And I don't know if, I'm right now in the process of looking into what is the most sensible. So if anybody's got ideas, okay, this is your day. Thank you.
I think it's also the right community, and by the way, this is just an example of how this also works here. Like Sunny just popped up about 2 weeks ago, out of nowhere, and just saying, "Hey, I have time. You know, can I do something?" And there's quite a few people like that who just come in, and that's how we also understand this kind of co-creating the hub, where it's actually building the space, designing the space, working on these things. We just try to figure it out together as a community. And there was another question up there. Actually, with the canton, we also talked to the city, but they they want to actually develop their own incubator in the clean tech space. So we heard about that, and when we talked to them, we thought, hey, great. So we said, we're also going to do clean tech here, and I think they got it the wrong way. So they, I think they had the impression that it would be a competition, so the relation wasn't the best to start with. But with the canton, we really resonated very well with the Standortförderung, kind of the creative industry with, what's her name, Anita Martinez. And they're actually supporting us both, also a bit financially even, but also symbolically, how they're hooking up our initiatives here to what's happening in the larger Zurich space. But we're still at the very beginning of that partnership, so we're still exploring what might be possible. It's a good question. We're actually just redefining that at the moment, because this whole process was kind of just emerging, hubs just popping up. And we just had a conference 2 months ago where we came together to kind of define what is the DNA of what's actually emerging here. And this is actually the topic of also my PhD, where I'm actually looking at how the hub network is kind of spreading around the world and what glues them together. And my understanding is that I'm more from a sociology side, where we look a lot at discourses and narratives of how the world is actually constructed through language. So what I think at the moment, what's really happening is that the story that you actually read on the homepage, of how the hub came into being, but also what it's trying to represent and what it's trying to do, is the kind of glue where everything kind of is kept together. Because all of us, we kind of share that story. We make it different in our local context. But actually, the interesting thing is when you go around the world, and I've been now to, I think, 5 or 6 hubs. There's a hub in Vienna, there's one in Milan. There was one in Berlin, which crashed because it was probably the wrong people running the space, which were more on the idealism level and less on the business side. But what's happening is that, for some reason, you get a very similar sense when you go into a hub, which is you immediately feel at home. I think that would be the common kind of denominator, which probably goes back to the fact that in every hub there's a host. So every hub has this kind of time-based business model as a core, and there's always a host working there to ensure that people feel at home, that they connect. So that would be probably more or less the common denominator, which makes every hub similar and yet different, but depending on the people, but also the actual space. Right, so all of the hubs are independent companies. Like we are a non-profit here. Most hubs are actually limited companies. Some hubs are cooperatives. So there's very different models. A lot of hubs are hybrids. Like Milan is both a foundation, an association, as well as a corporate. And they kind of made it tricky so that the tax authorities don't really get them. Which we're also thinking of here. Yes. What's connecting them on a formal level is that, at least at the moment, it's actually set up a bit like a franchise, where the founder holds the right to the brand, and where all the hubs are paying part of their revenue into the global network to ensure that these global systems can actually operate. But also that we are redefining at the moment, where we're in a process globally where the founder actually has to let go, because it just became apparent that, and I think this is also quite normal in a business kind of evolution, that with this huge growth, he gets about 50 emails every week from people who want to start a hub somewhere in the world. And he used to be the only one who can say yes or no to these people. So he's been kind of flying around the world and trying to make it happen. Of course, it didn't work. So what we're redesigning now is a system where the onboarding process of new hubs works more as a peer-based review. So, for example, if there is a new hub emerging in Geneva, which actually is, there's a hub right now, there's a team in Geneva, they would have to get a recommendation from Zurich, as well as probably Milan, or maybe Vienna, before they can enter the hub system. And that's how you kind of decentralize this whole process, and also empower hubs to establish more bilateral relationship, where as of now it's more the core is in London, and this has really become a bit of a bottleneck. So we're in that process right now. Not at the moment. The idea was there to have this kind of global passport. Although in reality how it works is that if you're a member here and you happen to be in Vienna, of course you can go there for a day, no one will ask, you're welcomed. If you stay there for 2 weeks, it's a different question, then you just pay something there. But that's how it's been working so far. But the idea is, I think, and this is quite complex, the idea was if you could have a global system which works the same, then that would be possible, but we're not Starbucks, and we don't want to be Starbucks, so I don't think it's ever going to be possible like that. What will be possible is that we'll have bilateral agreements. So if there's a hub in Geneva, it really makes sense that we offer that for members. Yeah, that's good. I would actually like to give it to my host here.
So yeah, a few examples of people. We have some real social entrepreneurs that you might have heard of. We have Sasha Nick, who is the founder of a company called CO2 Monitor. And what they do is they've made an online platform where you can very easily count your own CO2 footprint and find ways to reduce it. And he works with partner companies to make sure that their employees get incentivized to enter the system. So through his business model, through this online platform, he helps to reduce CO2. Another example is Lars Stein, who founded Studienaktie. And he wants to enable education. So what he does is people who have a project for education for themselves. He brings them together with private investors who don't want to put their money on a bank and just some investment fund, but want to invest in people. So he makes sure that there's a bilateral relationship between a person with a project and a person with some money to support him. Another example is Roman Gauss, who started the company Urban Farmers. And what they're trying to do is a bit different skill. They want to bring farming, ecological farming, into the cities. Some of you might have heard of this concept in the States. It's already pretty well known that on the rooftops in urban surroundings, you create ecologically friendly farms. But next to that, like those are real entrepreneurs who are building up something. We have these people from corporation. We actually have somebody from Bank Vontobel who works in sustainability strategies there and who just likes to learn from the network here what is going on in this field. Or we have somebody from the WWF who wants to see how can the WWF support innovation and support entrepreneurs. But we think actually that this is not enough, like the people we have here, and that's why we've launched a new innovation, which is our fellowship program. And maybe, Christoph, you want to briefly state what the fellowship program is?
Okay. So I will hand it over. For our last team members, you also meet him. Yeah.
Yeah, hi, my name is Hagen. Yeah, WWF Fellowship. Actually, we were looking for a way to somehow give people the opportunity to work in the hub, but also to get, for example, students who don't have money, or get people who have had different projects. So what we came up with was an idea to look for partnerships. For example, now we have WWF, and we had an agreement with them. So they give us an amount of money, 50,000 francs, and 34,000 francs is meant for the project. So we actually started a competition. We are looking for an idea. We have it online on our website, and you can apply. So if you have a cool idea, or let's say a business idea, how to, for example, fight against climate change, or any idea about ecological sustainability, you can apply. And after the process ends at, when is it? 12th of December. So the best idea will be awarded with this fellowship. So 34,000 francs is awarded to the fellow, and we will get 16,000 francs for administration and for providing the space. So yeah, the idea is just to make change happen through this fellowship, and the prototype is WWF, but we are looking for different organizations who like to, yeah, start another fellowship with us too. So we want to actually catalyze change through this fellowship program.